So on screen now, you'll see all our panelists and specialists that are joining us from the project team. I'll run through these if you guys wouldn't mind just waving to those online with us so they can put a face with the name. We introduced Jeff and Tyler earlier, but we got Jeff Erdman, our project manager. We got Tyler Allen, our environmental program manager. We have Mitch Shaw, he's our senior communications officer. We have H.G. Kunzler, he's our consultant project manager. We have Justin Peterson, our environmental lead. We have Jack Allen, who's our NEPA specialist. Megan Kilburn, our design lead. David Bassett, our traffic lead. Matt Montgomery, our noise lead or noise analyst. And then myself and Katie, who will be going back and forth as we read the Q&A questions. So,
do you want to take the first one, Craig?
I was going to say, we got 12 so far that came in. And when we sort these by upvotes, it starts us off with Trent. And so his question is, has UDOT considered a roundabout over the traffic at the intersection of Old Highway and Trappers Loop, is what I believe he's meaning. So I think we could start with our traffic lead on that one there. David?
Sorry, on the which question? I was reading through them.
Oh yeah, sorry, no, I was gonna pass this top question over to you. So it says, is keeping the current, well, it was actually related to, did we look at a roundabout at Trappers Loop and Old Highway?
That's what I was getting confused to, is the order changed.
Yeah, no problem.
So actually we did. A roundabout was actually considered at that intersection. It was found to actually in existing conditions. The important thing to note is we look at the existing conditions. We look at what would happen without the proposed system, and then what would happen with the proposed. But the proposed is actually out in 2050. So when we're talking about volumes, we're looking at volumes out that far. So when we actually analyzed the roundabout, we analyzed it in the 2050 scenario. So with all the growth that would happen over that many years, and we found that the roundabout was just not the right solution for the volume patterns that would be going through that. There are some very heavy through movements, but there's also expected to be some fairly heavy left movements. And we have those conflicting movements in roundabouts. They generally don't work really well. And we actually found that the delays that people would see could be up to 7 times as much as they would with a signalized intersection in the future.
Great, thanks, David. We are going to ask or answer Scott DeRue's question next. The interchange of Trappers Loop Road and Old Highway Road is becoming increasingly hazardous on snow basin ski days and special event days, plus during morning and evening commutes. It is nearly impossible to make a left-hand turn in either direction, dangerous, often taking up to 8 to 12 minutes and requiring one to unsafely dart between cars in both directions. Is there any possibility of having the planned traffic light at this intersection installed before the interchange is constructed? And I will let Jeff answer that question for us.
Thanks, Katie. At this time, UDOT doesn't have any plans for any intersection upgrades at the off-ramps. In order to do so, UDOT would need to perform a traffic analysis and do what they call a warrant study to determine the need for one. That doesn't mean that that's out of the question. I'm just currently not aware of any sort of improvement.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So this next couple, I think we can kind of go all together. There's 3 that are very similar in the question that they're asking. So I think I want to kind of read all 3 of these together, and then we'll answer them holistically. So I just want you guys online to make sure that we are seeing what's there, but we are going to try to answer one. So Kirsten first asks, is keeping the current Mount Green exit as well still an option? So that keep that in mind. Next one is Raylene's. Would UDOT consider keeping the westbound on-ramp open and closing the eastbound exit 92? This would be helpful for emergencies. And the next one is from David, says, I don't see any benefit in closing the existing exit 92. I would like to know why you would want to do that. I think it creates a funnel of traffic onto the new exit. Additionally, for communities nestled in the mountains, we need multiple points of egress in the event of a natural disaster. Closing exit 92 would place the communities west of the new interchange at risk. So as we look at these, the theme is talking about it. Are we going to be able to keep the existing exit 92 on and off ramps open for a variety of different reasons? As you saw in the video, this is something that we looked at. And I think we do have more detailed information about this. And I think, do we want to start with Jeff or HG and Justin? All three of you guys I know have talked about this. We've looked at it at length. Maybe Justin, do you want to lead us off?
Sure. I'll start. Jeff, HG, you fill in as you see fit, even Tyler. So this is something that was brought up at our first public meeting that we held at the very beginning of the environmental assessment process. And it's a topic that we continue to talk about internally as a team, and also with the county and emergency service providers. Ultimately, the decision was made to close exit 92, primarily because keeping it open would conflict with the ultimate purpose of this project, which is to remove that regional traffic off of Old Highway Road and SR 167. Keeping it open wouldn't allow for that removal to occur. And so that mixing of traffic that we talked about in the video, we talk about in the environmental assessment would still occur. And so it's being closed for that reason. However, as we've talked about it as a team and looked at it in the transportation section of the EA, there are numerous benefits to having the interchange at where we're proposing it and closing exit 92 from an emergency management standpoint, and also an emergency evacuation standpoint. Overall, an interchange here would improve traffic operations throughout Mountain Green, which in the event of emergency, we believe would make it easier for emergency responders to get to the area of concern, but also for people to evacuate. Also having interchange where it would be located allows for multiple ways to get out of Mountain Green. You can go east and you can get on I-84 at the interchange, or you can continue on SR 167. Under the current condition, if you have to evacuate, your only option is really to go west. You could go east, but you're contending with regional traffic. If you go west and enter onto I-84, the canyon gets very narrow and windy, and now you're also contending with interstate traffic that's going towards the Wasatch Front. It's possible that congestion could build and build and build on I-84 such that now you're at a standstill. Whereas if you could evacuate east at the new interchange, you're now not contending with that traffic going to Wasatch Front. And yes, so you have multiple points to evacuate the area. You can read more about that analysis, as we said, in the environmental assessment.
Thanks, Justin, for that. I would also like to add, one of the biggest things that we've heard from the public is actually accessing the old highway itself from the locals. And in an emergency, with the mixing of the regional and local traffic, specifically in an emergency, there would be a lot of congestion trying to access a specific westerly point, anybody west of the proposed interchange. And so we feel that it would be difficult to maintain that access along that highway versus having the interchange with the signalized intersection to mediate the flow of traffic through an emergency. And that's something that within our environmental document, they talk a lot about optimizing traffic patterns with the signal during specific events.
Yeah, if I can just add one more thing to that, as Justin and Jeff said, we looked at the pros and cons of all of those, of keeping it and not keeping it. Another benefit, I guess I would say, or reason for closing it is federal highway standard for rural interchanges. Separation is 3 miles, and this would put that within that 3 miles. And so that would be another reason why we'd be closing it.
Right. Anyone else before we move on to our next question? Okay, our next question comes from Trent Wynn. He is asking, does the study take into account the expected growth in the area and due to the 2034 Olympics? I think I'll let David and Justin answer this one.
I don't know, do you want to go first, Justin?
Sure, I'll go. So we did look at that. So when we evaluate the future transportation needs of an area, we use data provided by the state that shows how many people will live and work in an area. When we look at a very specific area, we'll adjust those totals, those number of jobs and population, based off the latest trends and plans adopted by whatever local jurisdiction we're working in. In addition to that, we'll often do some sensitivity testing where we might crank up the dials a bit, where we might increase those numbers from our baseline, future numbers, to see how resilient our design would be if, for whatever reason, the growth projections exceed what our official results show. And so we did that, and what we found is that by increasing the population and jobs by a percentage, which I apologize, I don't remember what percentage we increased it up to, the interchange and the extension of Travers Loop Road would still function. There would have to be some slight modifications to the design, particularly for going south on Travers Loop and then going west towards the Wasatch Front. There would need to be another lane for the on-ramp, but otherwise the intersection and the rest of the interchange should be able to accommodate growth above what we are officially projecting in our environmental assessment.
Yeah, and to add to that specifically, depending on the area, so when you break up the whole Mountain Green area, there's different areas, right? And certain areas are going to grow at different speeds. So we had our sensitivity, as Justin was explaining, sensitivity analysis actually had anywhere from 30 to 50% additional growth, depending on the area and the proximity to Snow Basin, those type of things. So we really tried to do that based on that. The interesting thing about the Olympics is what you would anticipate is actually just a not necessarily like by 2050, your growth is probably going to be fairly similar. But what's going to happen is that growth would happen earlier. So the Olympics or like that type of event will spur earlier growth. And that's why it's really important to look out the 2050, is because that actually does accommodate for some of those changes in growth patterns, but will ultimately get to a point where in 2050, with our sensitivity growth, it'll be a pretty bustling area up there with a lot of employment and a lot of households and whatnot. So that's just kind of a thing to keep in mind is the Olympics would spur the growth earlier, but not necessarily increase it past the sensitivity analysis we did on the 2050.
Wonderful, thank you. We will go to our next question. Is there adequate room with the railroad tracks as they exist for a full diamond interchange? This comes from Greg Mead. I will let Megan answer this question for us.
Yeah, so the current design is not a full interchange, but it has been set vertically high enough to allow for future full interchange to be implemented, which would require a bridge extension over the UPRR tracks. If this was to occur, it would need to be studied and funded separately from this project by Morgan County, but it is set up to be future compatible with a full interchange rather than the half that we are showing.
If I can add to that, to the spacing between where those eastbound ramps would be placed and the Union Pacific Railroad lines or right of way, there is adequate space in there. We've worked with Union Pacific Railroad and had them review some of those original or first design, preliminary designs, and they have responded as being they have no concern with that.
Hey, thank you. That, Katie, that one also kind of went along with Scott's as well. As the diamond interchange on I-84, the most effective or newest type of intersection available?
I could add
Megan,
to that.
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
We looked at a bunch of different interchanges for that area, specifically for here, based on the traffic projections that are anticipated for the area. As mentioned before, that this interchange will handle the traffic volumes that are projected for the area. Specifically, the main traffic volumes are going from eastbound and northbound and southbound and westbound. And those movements will be signalized. And so if there happens to be large volumes that are coming to the interchange at one time, then it can be, I guess, moderated, or we'll have a full green to allow that heavy traffic to go through the interchanges. So short, yes, we looked at a bunch of interchanges. There are others that are probably operate at a higher capacity, but this one would be adequate for what is projected for the area.
Thank you. We are going to go to Susie Whittier's question. What is the timeline for this project? And Jeff and Tyler, I'll let you take those.
Yes, so currently we are working on finalizing the environmental document, which we look to be finalizing this summer and getting a record of decision on that. Once that's approved, we would be moving to a design that currently is not fully funded for design. So there is not a schedule beyond this environmental document to advance the project. But depending on the need and the evaluation of our state funds and how they prioritize the funds, that's something that possibly in the future that they would fund to allow it to go to the next phase, which would be design. And then we would need to acquire funding for construction. So at this point, there is no planned project beyond the environmental document. Nor if Tyler can kind of add the process of the environmental document and how the department does things to keep the document open.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We do have this document moving on towards completion. This is a really crucial step of the public involvement to hear and to from the public, and also to share our designs and where we're moving on for this project. The next phase is to finalize the document, get a decision document signed, and then it's all up to funding and priorities as to when the next phase can be completed. That will take place over the next few years. Luckily, most of the right-of-way has already been acquired for this project in the current corridor that is proposed. So that can speed things along a little bit. But at this point, it's kind of hard to say exactly when the finalizing will go through. What we can say is that the county council is well aware of the project, and it is a priority project. That's why we're doing this environmental document at this point. So we're working towards it.
Great. Thank you. Katie, I think, should I'll this next one, I don't know where we're at in the thing, but I'll just start because I'm talking, I guess, so.
Go ahead.
Okay, the next question is from Debbie is where will the proposed noise barrier be? I think we'll start with Tyler and Matt to explain to us how that noise works and what the next steps are.
Yeah, so the current noise barrier that's been found to be feasible and reasonable, which are terms meaning it works and it is cost reasonable for the area, is just to the east of SR 167 Trappers Loop Road intersection up the hill from on Trappers Loop Road. It is about 15 feet tall and just nearing 700 feet long, 670 something feet long. That noise barrier is the one that actually did provide the benefit that would be necessary to qualify under our noise policy. That wall will be balloted, meaning that there'll be an opportunity for residents that are benefited by that wall to vote for a yes or no on that. And that will come closer to final design when we can kind of finalize locations and financing and everything like that for the project. Then we can begin the process of asking residents yes or no at that point.
All right, Matt, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, just one quick thing. The noise barrier analysis we performed is based on the future traffic volumes and future traffic noise. So we take into account the worst scenario for that future traffic noise, and that's what we're providing this proposed noise wall for. So that's what we used for that.
Great, thank you. For our next question, we're going to move to Trent Wynn. Does the UDOT environmental study consider light pollution anticipated on the exit and on-ramps as well as signage in the immediate area? Or is that outside the study area? Oh,
I can take a
Justin.
stab at that. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
That's a great question. That's not an issue that came up in our scoping phase the first time we came to the general public to get input on this. So we didn't do a very in-depth analysis. However, I believe our visual section in the environmental assessment does talk about the lighting along Trappers Loop and at the interchange at night would be visible from existing homes or future homes that would be built in Mountain Green. We did not do a really in-depth analysis of how extensive that light pollution would be, or how it would affect night skies or dark skies if that's a concern. We did not go to that level. We just kind of looked at it at a more higher level.
I can add a little bit to that though. UDOT does require any lighting design to follow the dark sky lighting requirements, and then also to shield it, point it away if it gets closer to people's homes and everything. So if lighting is implemented in the future, it will follow all dark sky lighting requirements, and then we would look at where that illumination is occurring, and if it is close to properties such as a residential home, we would try to point that away so that way it wasn't shining into any windows.
That's great, Megan. So in essence, that more in-depth analysis would occur during final design, which is the next phase.
Great. Thank you, guys. Let's look at this next one here. I think we might need to zoom into some of the design to make sure, but the first part of the question is talking about paint in the middle of the lanes, both right and forward directions. So we'll get that pulled up. The other part of the question pertains to overhead signage. Will there be any signs installed overhead at any point in the project? I think maybe Megan, that would be a good one to start with the overhead signage.
Yeah, we'll have guide signs following the Manual of Uniform Traffic Devices, which will be another final design item that we'll look into. But The interchange will be fully signed, and it could potentially have overhead signage showing people where to go, just as you would see at other interchange. It's pretty set in stone by FHWA, so that way it's consistent throughout all the states on how that interchange signing is. So it'll be very similar to what you see today, just at the new location.
Super. All right, let's go to the question about the rest area. Why close the rest area? I will let HG take a stab at this one.
Yeah, as we were looking at alternatives for the interchange type, we identified or understand that UDOT previously purchased right away through this general area from Trappers Loop intersection, Old Highway, down to I-84. And so looked at an alignment that would potentially go through that area. That is going through the rest area. We met with UDOT on a number of occasions discussing the use of that rest area, and they identified that they were planning on closing that interchange or that rest area. And so we're utilizing the right of way that UDOT has previously purchased or has, as if, and like the rest area, to place the interchange so that we can minimize right-of-way impacts through the area. That being said, they've also identified that the facility itself, the rest area facilities as they are now, are quite dated and not in proper condition. There is one that has potential for leaky septic system. And so that would be another reason why we would want to close it, so it's not affecting the water supply for the area.
Great. Thank you, HG. Let's answer kind of 2 in 1 here with Scott Duncan and Simon Post. So he said, in general, related to the existing question, what can the general public do to expedite this project? And the other one's also related. It's talking about, does the project have to be fully funded to move into the design phase? Jeff, you want to answer those for us?
Yes. Typically, our funding, how we decide is through planning organizations, and the department meets with those and they decide how to best utilize the money. That we have a transportation commission where we meet and decide how the money is allocated throughout the state. So I'm not aware that Morgan County has an MPO. I don't know if HG can help me out on that, but I think the public could just express to their local leaders the need for that, and they discuss and meet with their representatives and legislators, so that they can go to the Transportation Commission meetings and advocate for this project. The next question was, does the project have to be fully funded to move to the design phase? And typically the department does not like to go into the design phase unless we have a stream of funding that would get us through construction. And so depending on how, a lot of times our funding isn't always put into one year, it's kind of allocated to the department in multiple years. So that doesn't necessarily, if we had a commitment that money would be allocated to this project between fiscal years, we would go ahead and start the design even though we weren't fully funded. But we would start and knowing that the money, once the project is designed and ready for advertisement, that there would be construction dollars for that.
Thank you. We're coming kind of close here to the end, so let's take one more question, maybe one or two more questions. Let's see, there's one, let's go with Oliver. It says, my question is, would an overpass make more sense going from Trappers to 84 and vice versa? I don't think a street light will help in the interchange, causing still traffic backup during busy times, because you still have traffic going east and west that will hold up traffic north and south, thinking long term. So, HG, maybe do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that one. I think your intuition is good, and let me explain maybe a little bit more of the situation as we see it from a traffic standpoint. Again, the heavy movements are going eastbound to northbound, as you can imagine, and then southbound to westbound. With the signals being placed at the interchange ramps, that will meter or help provide a call or a green movement for the traffic that is the heaviest. And so in those particular cases, you're probably going to see green arrows or green light for those heavy movements. If there is a vehicle that comes and actuates from a different location or a different direction, then the signal will change and allow that vehicle to go through, and then it will switch back to the higher movement to make sure that it is addressing the heavy movements as a whole. I don't know, David, you probably explained that much better than I could.
So just to clarify, there's obviously two locations where this is. I think this one's actually talking about an overpass across Old Trappers, or not Old Trappers, Old 91. So not at the interchange, but at that. In reality, anytime you can grade separate stuff, it definitely is going to function better. That's why we have interchanges on freeways, because your freeway movements are pretty heavy. So as HG said, Oliver, your intuition is correct. The prime at the Old Trappers at Trappers and Old 91 intersection, there is a very heavy north-south movement. That is correct. However, the way this works is when we do our signal timing, it's based on the lane configuration. So if you're thinking about how your intersection is configured, if you have higher movements like northbound, southbound, you can add more lanes at that intersection to do that. This, of course, hasn't been finalized. That'd be finalized and done in final design, but we take that in consideration with the signal. The other thing to keep in mind is that a grade separated or an overpass are pretty expensive. So we have to take in consideration the cost of the build versus the benefit you're getting from that. And our analysis is pretty clear that a signalized intersection with the right lane configuration at this location would be beneficial, and you'd actually have some really low delays whatsoever. And even that, and again, we looked at 2 periods, and I think this is something that kind of is a lot of the questions were alluded to. We looked at an evening, or after people get home from work, that PM peak is what we call it. So just that congested time, rush hour in the PM. But we also looked at a Saturday, which is the period that where people are going to go skiing, the highest volumes there, and those volumes are significantly different. Looking at the 2 time periods, and so they'll work with both. That's the important thing, is like your peak snow periods. We did look at that and whatnot. As for the interchange, to kind of go back with to support what HG was saying about at the interchange, is your southbound right movement basically has no conflicts. So basically they can just go and flow onto the interstate, one of those inters, right? The interstate pretty freely. So your only other major movement is getting, off of the freeway and trying to head north. So without that huge conflicting movement at the interchange, that left turn movement will have a lot of green and allow it for a really easy functional thing. Actually, even more so than a stop sign, which I know was discussed, or was mentioned in one of the questions as well, because a stop sign, somebody actually has to physically stop, then go, as long as they go, especially if they're obeying the law, right? And so you actually get delays for that. So having that green arrow, so that left turn can move, getting off the freeway will actually create a much more efficient and easy flowing traffic pattern.
If I can add a couple more points to that too. Thanks, David, for better explanation of all those things. If we did a flyover, what we were trying to do also is be consistent with local land use plans for the area, which are being planned around the corridor that UDOT has purchased. And so if we did a flyover, that would not be consistent with their land use plans for the area. Also, there would be greater environmental impacts with the flyover that going directly through some major wetlands, the river, the Conway Creek, and other T&E species.
Great. Thank you, guys. We are at our time that we have scheduled for today. So we appreciate everybody that's asked questions. We know we didn't get to all of them, so we just encourage you again to come to our in-person meeting tomorrow. I think a lot of the questions that are there really probably require more of an in-person discussion, which we'll be able to do a lot better tomorrow. So please come to that. Also, just a reminder that any of the comments that we receive online or in person tomorrow or through email, they need to be made by May 8th, and then we will answer all of those in our with the completion of our environmental process. So there'll be written responses to everything that we receive. So again, yeah, thanks everybody for attending tomorrow, our meeting 5:30 to 7. If you guys have any more questions, you can reach out to us at our hotline or email, or again, this presentation will be available tomorrow online at our website, seen on screen. So thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you tomorrow.